Colin Kane. Today I'm going to be covering verbal conflict in siblings. So to introduce and contextualize this topic here, conflict management is paramount in sibling relationships, and the reason for this is the sibling relationship is one of the most important relationships that anyone will ever encounter. It's someone that you encounter on a daily basis and share many of the most important events in your life with. So dealing with conflict in an effective way is very important in this. Conflict in the sibling relationship is most important in early adolescence. Furthermore, the proximity age directly relates to the frequency of conflict. So the age of early adolescence, and if it's a close age range between 3 to 5 years, that is where you'll see the most conflict in a sibling relationship. Furthermore, the same-sex relationships have the most rivalry. So if it's 2 males versus 2 females, those are going to have the most conflict as compared to male and female relationships. So to cover the gap in this, most research does not cover adolescents. It actually covers toddlers and anywhere from age range 5 to 12 years old. I'm specifically covering ages from 14 to 18. And also I'm only covering verbal conflict. Most of the other studies cover conflict as a whole and don't address specifically verbal or physical conflict. And to address the 2 factors that lead to most conflict early on, I'm going to choose a tight proximity at age, 14 to 18 years old, and I'm going to be studying subjects of the same gender. So why is this important to you? 28% of people experience sibling estrangement, meaning that 28% of people distance themselves from their siblings after leaving the household. So determining if verbal conflict is good and how to deal with verbal conflict, that can help to bring these siblings back together and help them engage in constructive conflict. In other words, it can help guide the sibling relationship. So this leads us to the research question. Can verbal conflict be assessed as either constructive or destructive within the context of sibling relationships among male high school siblings? So first, to cover constructive conflict is positively linked to relationship quality. So meaning if you engage in constructive conflict consistently, you'll have a better quality relationship further on down the road. The goal of constructive conflict is to reduce and tolerate differences. So any conflict, the goal is to reduce differences, and constructive conflict is when this is successful. Constructive conflict is linked to negotiation tactics such as reasoning, and it is not like manipulation and coercion. It is reasoning and working to find the differences and minimize them. On the other hand, there's destructive conflict. Destructive conflict directly is linked to negative relationship quality, and it provides a negative conflict outcome. Destructive conflict is something that is going to lead the conflict to extend past the immediate conflict and go and affect the relationship later on. Type strategies that are associated with destructive conflict include manipulation. Reasoning is more constructive, and manipulation and coercion are things that lead to negative relationship quality and are part of destructive conflict. Now, how do these come together? These come together in verbal conflict. This is because verbal conflict is both constructive and destructive. There's reasoning, which is constructive conflict, and then there's manipulation, which is destructive conflict. There are many conflict strategies within verbal conflict that fall under both constructive and destructive. So this study will help to determine if verbal conflict is overall more constructive or destructive. And the way verbal conflict is measured to determine if it is constructive or destructive is based on the voluntary time spent together after the conflict. This has been proven by multiple studies, but is most prevalent in a study performed by Raffaele. So for my data collection part of my method, I had the goal of 6 participants, all ranging ages 14 to 18, which was easy to obtain because I attend a high school, and at that high school, that is the only age range that is there. My collection period will take place from November to February, and I will obtain a consent form for every participant that participates in my study. Also in that table, you can see I obtained an average age of 15.83, which is successful because that is adolescent, and that proximity in age is all within 2. So now moving on to my method, I'm performing a qualitative study Specifically, I'm going to do a semi-structured interview that is adapted from Rinaldi. The reason I'm doing a semi-structured interview is because it allows for me to understand each specific relationship more in depth. Every sibling relationship is different, and therefore a structured interview would not be the best way to go. The success of conflict in determining whether it is constructive or destructive will be measured in voluntary time spent together. Specifically, if the siblings voluntarily spend time together within the same day of the conflict, that'll be categorized as constructive conflict. Now, there are 3 stages to this interview that I will be conducting. The first stage will be obtaining background information based on the siblings' relationship with each other. The next stage in the interview, I will begin to ask about a specific conflict and what happened in this conflict and their side of the story. The third stage, I will then ask them to reflect on the conflict and how they think it was resolved and what they could have done better. So the results of my thematic coding process, I was able to come up with 3 conclusions. Verbal conflict was overall constructive, as all 6 sibling groups spent time together within the same day. There was 2 main conflict strategies used, and these were used by 4 out of the 6 sibling groups, which shows that these conflict strategies are very popular among siblings. Additionally, participants viewed verbal conflict as positive, and their perception on it was overall very good. Many of them viewed it as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to build character. Verbal conflict being constructive among all 6 siblings was very interesting, as verbal conflict does have its pitfalls with manipulation and coercion. However, all 6 siblings saw it as positive, which was very interesting and contradicted a study from Rinaldi and Howe. Parental intervention and spending time were the 2 main conflict strategies used in this. Parental intervention is specific to sibling relationships because they're the only group that has the parental authority. Conflicts between 2 coworkers or 2 friends don't have that type of intervention, and that being available to only siblings and them taking advantage of it was very interesting. Also, I was able to, from the siblings' perception on verbal conflict, I was able to tell that verbal conflict is better than physical conflict. This agrees with the study from Rinaldi, which also stated that verbal conflict is way better than physical conflict, because even though verbal conflict has its pitfalls, physical conflict only leads to bad things. Some limitations that I had in this study are recall and response bias. This all has to do with the interview process. Recall bias is when they're recalling a specific event, which in my case was a specific conflict that they had with their sibling. They seem to view this in a more positive light and can't recall exactly what happened. Another pitfall is response bias, which they will answer the socially acceptable answer. And that is a problem in this because if I'm asking them about a conflict, the response bias might with that bias, they might want to respond with a more positive answer than what really happened, just because it's socially acceptable and it's what they think I would want to hear. So finally, this leads us to our conclusion. I was able to answer my research question effectively and determine that verbal conflict is constructive in nature. This has implications for both siblings and parents. Siblings can try to participate in verbal conflict instead of physical conflict, and parents can try to steer their children in that way. Furthermore, from this, I was able to learn that conflict is an opportunity to grow. With all 6 conflicts being constructive conflict, and all of the siblings saying that they grew or had a positive outlook of it, that shows that conflict is an opportunity to grow. Finally, sibling conflict is especially important because it is the most important relationship in one's life. Having a good relationship with your sibling is very important in the future, and you have to create that through constructive conflict.